Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. Okay, so finally it's my turn. Thank you all. And thank you for inviting me for such a long distance away. I come from Norway. It takes a lot of time to get here. And when I had the invitation this summer, I was on holiday, on my summer holiday. And I can assure you that I was nearly falling off my chair because I was so excited. So now finally the day is here. My son, he asked me, so are you going on a missionary trip now? Are you going on a mission trip? No, I said, no, I'm not a missioner. I can't do that. But during the days that I've been here, I've gained some experience, gained some insight in your society. And I think that there are more parallels than we would first think of, considering the rating of the Corruption Perception Index, where Norway has been rated very high up for many, many years, since 1995, actually, when it was first there. But I wanted to start to say that no country is free of corruption. No society is free of corruption. And I want to share with you some examples from Norway. This is a very serious case. We have been talking today about corruption within the police sector. And this police officer, he was jailed for 21 years in drugs case. And it has corruption implications because he took bribes in cases and so that the drug could come into the country. And this has been going on for many, many years. This policeman has, of course, appealed this decision, so it's not a final court case yet. The second one, we have heard about the license office in Trinidad, Tobago, and problems there. And a parallel in Norway was actually this one, falsified driver's license. This is a case that is under investigation, so we haven't had a final court decision on this one either. But this is also about taking bribes, issuing driver's license. So we all know the serious consequences if this is a sort of a practice that could go on. So just to ensure you that also in Norway, Transparency International, the Norwegian chapter is needed. But I'm here to tell you, and this is a very sort of rare role that I have, that I'm gonna talk about the positive things and the things that we have achieved, because obviously we have achieved a lot in my country. But you know, as an NGO representative, you want things to improve all the time. You are impatient and you see, you know, things that could be better. You ask for more transparency. You ask for more enforcement. You ask that the business sector should be more active, more proactive. You want the municipalities to get rid of the nepotism, the favoritism and things, and the corrupt practice that we see also in my country. So Norway is a small country, but it's very long stretched. It's 1,800 kilometers from north to south. So if you bend Norway down to Europe, you get almost to Italy. So it's a very, very long stretch country, about 5.3 million inhabitants. And you see, what is interesting is that the whole shore here is plenty of oil and gas. And I'm going to talk about the industry and in my presentation. So oil and gas industry has been very, very important for our economy. So this is also a parallel to this country. So what is working well? Some examples. Survey after survey, reports after reports shows that we have well-functioning governance institutions. We have a National Integrity System report that was launched by TI Norway in 2012. Yesterday, I was at the launch of the Global Competitiveness Report 2017 and 2018 by the World Economic Forum, a high ranking also there. We have a high degree of transparency, access to information, open state budgets, and so on. And I would also say there are always some buts, but responsible and transparent management of oil and gas revenues. And this is very, very important. There is a high political consensus on these matters. And I would also mention, I went to a panel discussion yesterday when the World Economic Forum report was launched. And I introduced the issue of trust. In my country, we have a high level of trust. And the audience yesterday, they laughed at me when I said that we actually, the Norwegian population in general, actually trust our politicians. And we trust the media. And you are laughing too. But this is I think, a very, very, very important thing to mention, that we do trust, our government and the politicians. We trust one another. And this leads to, kind of low transaction costs in a way. I've seen contracts of hundreds and hundreds of pages regulating every little detail. I don't like that. A contract should be one page, because we do that to formalize things, but we trust one another. So, some words about how did we make oil revenue to benefit the people. Just a brief history and some fundamental issues. You may know that Norway was occupied by the Nazis in the Second World War that lasted for 5 years, 1940 to 1945. So this was a very, very difficult period for Norway. And Norway before that was one of Europe's poorest countries. We had fish, we had some industry, but it was quite a poor country. And then we were occupied. So you can imagine that it was a very, very difficult situation to recover from. And so late in the 50s, oil and gas was discovered in the Netherlands, which is quite close to Norway. And that gave some optimism also in Norway that there might be some oil and gas as well. I'm not going to all the details, but in 1971, the production started, and we established a state-owned oil company because we didn't have the know-how and so on. So we needed to have a state-owned company to ensure that we, the Norwegians, learn how to do this business. In 1990, the government pension fund was established. And in 2001, there was also political consensus that the so-called 4% rule, the petroleum revenues, shall be gradually phased into the economy, and it should be estimated at 4% a year. In 2007, Norway joined the very, very important initiative called Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. And I know that Trinidad and Tobago is also part of that initiative. And in 2011, we were so-called EITI compliant. So important preconditions. Democracy was re-established. There was a consensus in politics to build the country towards a welfare state. We had free, and still have free media and press. Freedom of Information Act was introduced in 1970. Public state budget. But as I said, there was lack of national knowledge and competences. So in 1971, when the first oil and gas was discovered, the Standing Committee on Industry in the Parliament, they produced what we since then have been called the 10 Oil Commandments. So these principles have been subsequently been significant for the direction and the shape of the Norwegian petroleum activities. And some examples of these commitments. Number one, the oil and gas resources should benefit the society as a whole. Number two, stepwise and timely exploration and development of the resources. And number three, the presence of natural resources should lead to industrial development. And the principle of benefit of the Norwegian society as a whole is even reflected in the Act. At the beginning of the Act, this is the first that you're reading when you look on the Act that govern the petroleum activities. So this has been a very, very important part of the Norwegian economy. And so in 2009, approximately 27% of the total state revenue came from the sector. And as here in Trinidad and Tobago, it has decreased because of lower oil prices. I think there might be other reasons here in your country for the enormous decrease that we've heard of. But it has decreased, so last year, approximately 13% of the total state revenue came from the oil and gas sector. So yeah, this is just the figures. It's going up and down, and you can see that the last years it's been gone a little bit down, but it's still a very high income. I think it's also worthwhile to reflect a little bit on the tax policy. The issue of tax has been touched upon many times in this morning, and the underlying thinking is that, well, we have implemented a specific fiscal system designed to secure the revenues from the sector. This specific fiscal system is explained by the objective that all petroleum resources shall benefit the society as a whole, as I told you, and that the oil and gas companies are allowed to exploit a very valuable and scarce resource. And as we all know, it's a non-renewable source. It's going to end someday. So the ordinary tax rate is the same as for land activities, which is 24%. But and there is a special tax rate on the oil industry, which is 54%. So you can put those numbers together and figure out the revenues that the state have from this sector. And still, the oil companies are making good business, despite this tax policy that we have. I mentioned the EITI for you, the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. We have, after we have joined that initiative, we have established a sort of a one-stop shop for information, which means that all the information I've given you so far can be found on this webpage. And it's all also in English, so it's worth exploring. So a few words about the government pension fund. So all the revenues are now going into this pension fund. And the purpose of the government pension fund is to facilitate government savings necessary to meet challenges for the future, raise in public pension expenditures in the coming years, and so on and so forth. So these are our savings. So the pension fund, in a few words, it is a tool to strengthen the budget process and it builds on existing institutions. The fund is only invested abroad in financial assets, and this ensures the risk diversification and a good financial returns and helps to protect the non-oil economy. And there is a high degree of transparency and disclosure of information. You can enter the fund and you can access you can search for a certain company and you can see whether the pension fund is invested in that company or not. And its portfolio is very, very big. It's invested in, I think now more than 7,000 companies worldwide. So, so the market value to the government pension fund has just risen, as we see, every single year. And when I talk about the numbers, when I talk about the assets and how much it is, I use the notion fantasillion because it's really a lot of money. But as I said, we are 4.3 million people, and if we divide the total market value, it should mean that every individual in Norway has its share in the fund worth more than $100,000. Every individual. So these are money regarded that it's the people's money. So the fund capital inflow consists of all government petroleum revenues, and I explained to you the 4% the spending rule, that only 4% of the real return of the fund should be spent on an annual budget. And this is also something that, when we have this kind of money, it's very tempting for politicians to spend it on all kind of good purposes. But it's also a political consensus about this, the spending rule. I should also mention for you the Council on Ethics, which was established in November 2004. So the Council on Ethics is giving the bank who is managing the fund, Norges Bank, the Norwegian bank, should give advice on whether or not to invest in specific business or specific companies. And to help us there, we have developed some ethical guidelines. So the bank is making the decision on exclusion of companies if they behave in an unethical way. so both the bank's decision and the council's recommendations, they are made publicly available on the website. So in brief, the ethical guidelines says that the fund must avoid investments that constitute an unacceptable risk of contributing to serious breaches of its norms, and so on and so forth. So what are the norms? Practices that may lead to exclusion include serious or systematic human rights violations, severe environmental damage, gross corruption, serious violations of rights of individuals in situations of war and conflict, or other particular serious violations of fundamental ethical norms. So what the Council on Ethics is doing is that sometimes they receive informations from NGOs, and they will go and do some investigations on a specific company to see whether are they operating in line with the norms or not. And then they would give, if there are findings of, let's say, gross corruption, they would give advice to the bank that they should disinvest, that they should sell the shares. So, yeah, so this is something that hopefully would also be a norm to other investors. And we know that, other investors are following the Norwegian banks, you know, when they publicly says that now they are selling their shares in this and that company because of this and that. We know that there are other investors that follow these recommendations. Okay, so another. This was a little bit about handling the revenues and the overall management of it. I'm also going to present to you a study that we conducted in 2012, TI Norway, which is called the National Integrity System. And so this is a holistic evaluation of a country. What is it? The main governance institution in terms of their capacity, transparency, accountability, and integrity, and their interaction with each other. And why did we do that? Well, even though if we have a high score on the CPI, we wanted to go a little bit more in depth and to see how do our institutions actually function. So this is a methodology that was developed by Transparency International, the secretariat in Berlin. And these studies has been conducted in many, many countries. I don't know if you in Trinidad and Tobago has conducted one. I don't think so. But this has been very, very important for our activities later on. So it's a holistic systemic view of governance, and it focuses on corruption prevention system, both in law and in practice. So it's produced by in-country experts, and it's a complement to the various Transparency International service and like the CPI and the Global Corruption Barometer and so on and so forth. So it provides evidence-based policy recommendations. I think that's what I'm going to say. It's a very detailed, it's quite a detailed survey, so I'm not going into too many details. But you know, we use this symbol with the pillars. This is the symbol of a well-functioning integrity system. You know, all the pillars are in a good shape, and this is what we say when we have a dysfunctional national integrity system. So the institutions are examined along 3 dimensions: capacity, governance, and their role. So each dimension comprises a set of indicator questions answered qualitatively and quantitatively. That gives a score. And it should be noted that there are, of course, many, many ways to assess whether an institution can be said to be robust, efficient, and characterized by integrity. But this is one way to do it. So, yeah. So it all resulted in this report. You see, it's a whole little book. And we called it Norway's Integrity System Not Quite Perfect, question mark. And you can see that, well, the overall result is that, yes, we have well-functioning institutions in our country. There are some weaknesses, and out of those weaknesses, we came up with some recommendations. Yeah. And one of the recommendations having said that, I think that Germany was coming up with 83 recommendations. Isn't that right, you get? I think they did. But we limited ourselves to 9 recommendations. So one example, we found that there was a lack of rules on conflicts of interest and a lobby register for the parliamentary representatives. So this was one of the weaker part of the integrity system. So this leads me to the very difficult question on how. What do we do when we see the results? What do we do after we have examined when we have the knowledge? What do we do with the results? How do we improve? This is a very, very difficult, but I think this is the reason why we're here. So I'll share with you some of the experiences that Transparency International Norway has had since I came into the office. And I think the most important thing that we have done is that we need to work together, really work together. We are a small secretariat of 3 persons. We do not have a voice unless we have joint action with others. So how do we do that? Well, 2 examples. It could be joint actions, ad hoc groups, which is time limited, or it could be more strategic partnership, a longer term cooperation. It's fundamental that we accept that we have different roles in society, but if we share the same goal, many things can be achieved. So we just start somewhere. And you didn't say that today, Uget, in your speech. I couldn't hear it. But Uget, she has a wonderful expression to create islands of integrity. And I really like that so much. Because even if there is difficult situations and difficult, conditions to operate in, you can go together and create these islands of integrity. And then to hope that there is, waves that follow and other that follow suit. 2 examples. Susanne, are you sleeping? How much time do I have left? 2 minutes. 1 minute for each then. I told you that one of the results that we found in our NIS report was the lack of transparency in lobbying. So what did we do? We established an ad hoc group together with people with other functions, other roles in society, but with the same interest, which was TI Norway, the Norwegian Press Association, Association of Norwegian Editors, and the Norwegian Communication Association. The four of us. A small, effective little group. We came together, we found out what should such a register look like. We spent maybe 2 days together figuring out, coming to an agreement. And we've had a fresh debate on the revolving doors in connection to the parliament elections last time in 2013. So there was also a private members' bill on lobby register from the Liberal Party. So there was an opportunity for us to join forces. There was a debate, there was a public debate on this. So here we are in action. A cold January in front of the parliament, snowing, freezing cold, where we were standing with our, little ideas around our neck. And so the group are here, the quartet is now here talking to one of the members of parliament. And we were quite clear. We wrote articles in the newspaper and so on and so forth. But I'm afraid so far, we're not giving up. This has not been a success story, unfortunately. But is this a work with or in progress? Another example, strategic partnership. Other service has shown us, and also a lot of media articles and so on and so forth has shown us that Norway has a very vulnerable sector, highly prone to corruption, which is the municipal sector. And we have more than 400 local governments in our country. More than 400, you can imagine. So the smallest one lives just 200 or 300 people. So you can imagine the question of conflict of interest, nepotism, favoritism, things like that. So what we did was we joined the Norwegian Association of Local and Regional Authorities, KS. And again, absolutely different roles, but the same goal, municipalities free of corruption. So we started up with a handful of these 400 municipalities. Who is willing? We started to invite them. And a few, I think we started with 4. And we had some funding. So the work, little by little, we started the work. And we established networks of 40 municipalities, which was actually covering 40% of the population in Norway. And we arranged workshops with learning, training, homework, experience sharing, and we said there should be no taboos. You know, only the word corruption is a sort of taboo in my country. We were focusing on prevention and good practices. And the participants, they were the head of administration and key staff personnel. And yeah, so this was a long ongoing process, but the outcome of it was this handbook that we created together in anti-corruption, and it's called Protect Your Municipality. And this has been extremely useful, and we know that other chapters in the movement This is why we also translated this one to English, because we wanted others to, if they can be of use for other chapters, we will be happy to share. And I know positively that at least 3 chapters has adjusted and adopted a lot of what we have found in this handbook. And it's been distributed to all the municipalities all over the country with the help of this organization, you know, the KS, that could give us, you know, competences, logistics, financial support, and a project rooted at the municipal level to make sure the outreach to the municipal level. So this has been a success story, I would say. And this gentleman, smiling so nicely over here, he is the Minister of Local Governments. And he was actually at the launch. You see he's holding the handbook. And I think this is a very good sort of tone from the top quote to end my speech. Public sector is based on trust. We can only remain this level of trust if we in the Norwegian society focus on our attitudes and behavior, transparency and access to information, and good control mechanisms where needed. So by these words, this is my contribution. So if you would like to ask questions, I'll be here during the day. I think we have to continue the program now. If you know, I had all these slides, I'll be happy to share with you if you would like to keep them. And I'll be very, very happy if some of what I've said could inspire some of you. So thank you.